Well, we'll begin. Good evening, everybody. We may have some people joining and then stepping back out at certain points. So we'll walk through as we did earlier today. And just so that you know, we are recording this and it will likely be on the employee or probably the employee tab of the portal so that you can access it at a future time. But we'll send that notification out so that you're aware of it. I wonder if you could join me in a prayer as we begin. Lord, we thank you for the gift of this moment with you. We trust that you are here. That's your promise. Would you guide us? Would you hold our lives? Remind us that you're holding us. All the details, our past and our future in this moment. And Lord, I ask that you would guide our conversation and open our hearts to hear what you need us to hear. Thank you. We pray this in your name, Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Well, I'm glad you could join us, Scott, and there may be others. Tonight, we'll hear a little bit in just a moment from Frank Rubino, who is not only one of our incredible professors, but also an expert in trauma. And he's going to be sharing a little bit about how our bodies react or interact with trauma or stress or extended stress and other pieces connected to that. And Lauren, thrilled to have you here tonight as our director of CAPS. And both Frank and Lauren are clinical therapists. And Lauren's going to talk about normalizing our emotions and how to navigate this time. I really appreciate you being here, Lauren. And then I'll finish up talking about God, what he says about all of this, and his resources to some degree will touch the surface. But if there's anything tonight or on this video that touches you in some way that you'd like to follow up, please contact any of us. We are more than willing to have a conversation with you. All right? Frank, why don't you start us out tonight?
All right. Thanks, John. So when we think about issues of stress, we think about what our body does, what stress is, and stress is really not much more than force. It's force of one thing on another. If you think about it in a term of construction or building, if you look at your house, there are stress points in the house, right? So we even know that gravity even pulls on things and pulls on us in ways and creates stress. So it's a physical force sometimes, but it can also be a psychological force too. And when that happens, our body responds in very specific ways. And much like the walls in our house or a roof might respond, our bodies respond too. So we are designed to react when we are presented with a threat of some kind. And that threat could be a physical threat. It could be a psychological threat. It could be a number of different types of threats. And our body responds to that. We call that a fight or flight response, right? So we talk of this in biological and psychological terms as a sympathetic nervous system activation. So this is when our brain releases hormones that cause our bodies to respond and get ready to face this threat. So some of those things that these hormones do is some of these, number one, our heart rate starts to jump. Our heart rate begins to pound to send blood to all of our working muscles. Our respiration increases. Our respiration increases so that it oxygenates that blood and gets our large muscle groups ready to either fight or to flee. So our veins begin to constrict. We have vasoconstriction, as we call that, which causes our blood pressure to increase. So that can send that blood even faster coursing through our bodies to get us ready to face this threat. And there are some systems that begin to slow down and work less effectively. So for example, our body says, well, there's only one thing that we're interested in, and that's keeping alive. Everything else we don't need. If it's geared toward fighting or fleeing, that we're going to increase. If it's geared toward anything else, we're going to either slow it down or stop it, right? So our digestion slows down, our salivation slows down, our ability to taste goes away, we lose binocular vision, we get what we call tunnel vision. So we're only able to see what's directly in front of us. So this is our brain's way of saying, well, that threat is going to be ahead of us, so that's where I'm going to focus. We have an increase in acuity of our vision, so we can see things very, very clearly that are right in front of us in ways that we can't normally. We have what we call auditory exclusion, so we can't hear things that we normally would hear. When we train law enforcement, we teach recruits and police officers to give loud, repetitive verbal commands, because people that are experiencing high stress aren't going to be able to hear necessarily. If you've ever fired a gun outside, you know how loud that is without ear protection. So you imagine if you fire a gun inside with no ear protection, how loud that would be. And yet, after those kinds of incidents, police officers don't even know how many times they fired their gun, never heard it. It's just part of the auditory exclusion part of our brain. Our bodies begin to sweat when we're under this kind of stress for a couple of reasons. Number one, we have to cool our bodies. Our bodies don't do well with a spiked heat. That's a fever when we're sick, right? So our body realizes, oh, we have to control our heat. So the sweat helps to keep us cool. It also lubricates our skin in case we are fighting, in the fighting part of the fleeing, that we don't get injured so badly. Our blood begins to pool, so it pulls away from our extremities, so that if we're likely to get injured if we're fighting for our life, that way we don't bleed badly. So that's why you might feel a sense of cold encountering something like this. You might actually feel cold. You're cold because your body has taken the blood and they're putting them right to those large muscle groups, because your body says, look, we need to fight or flee. So that's what is gonna be working. We lose other things too. So we lose the ability to do fine motor skills. So if you were in the middle of a fight or flight and someone handed you a pen and said, here, write your name, you're not going to be able to do it, right? You simply lose the ability. The next thing to go as our heart rate increases are our complex motor skills. So that's doing more than one thing at once. And our gross motor skills are the last thing to go. That's our just ability to move our arms and legs, because in fleeing, that's all you need to do. So there's a lot that goes on when we're experiencing a fight or flight or a sympathetic nervous system activation. And one of the things that we're not able to do very well is think our way through things. It's that ability to kind of get your brain says, listen, we don't need to be creative. We don't need to paint a picture or write the great American novel. We need to survive, and that's it. So our ability to think things through is really impaired and hampered. And also, among those hormones that go through our body is cortisol. It's one of those stress hormones. You may have heard about cortisol, what cortisol does. Cortisol is fabulous for getting us up and moving immediately. It's not fabulous, as it turns out, to be hanging around in our blood for very long. Chronic levels of cortisol really injure the way that our brain codes memory. So when you're in one of these kind of situations, your fight or flight, that it really hampers our ability to remember what's going on. Our brain says, we don't need to worry about remembering these things. We need to worry just about survival. So this is why when something might happen, and then we might later think, gee, I've got a little bit of a gap. I'm not sure how did this happen? What's the order of the way these things happened? We're not crazy. It's just that our brain in that moment says we're not needing to remember these things for later right now. That's not what's key. What's key is being able to survive to the next moment. So what happens is when we're chronically stressed, our brain is always pumping low levels of these hormones kind of all the time through our body. So we're experiencing this little minor fight or flight all the time. So you've got a constant, you may not lose all these senses all the time, but it's there enough that it really hampers our ability to do certain things. So one of the things that you can't do during this is concentrate very well. You've got adrenaline pumping through your body, and adrenaline is great for getting us up and moving, but it's not so great for sitting and contemplating. It's in fact, it's pretty lousy for sitting and contemplating. Cortisol is the same way. Cortisol, as it turns out, is linked to heart disease because it actually breaks down some of our organs when it sits for long periods of time. It's not designed. It's sort of like putting nitrous oxide in your engine. It's great for short bursts. It's actually, you can't beat it for a short burst, but you can't drive around like that for very long. You damage your engine and damage your system. And our bodies work very similarly. So when we're experiencing low levels of this kind of chronically, it really hampers our ability to connect with ourselves in that way. Another thing that happens is that it causes us difficulty in being able to rest or being able to sleep. So if you're not sleeping well, you're not well rested, the parts of our brain that are in charge of learning and creativity aren't able to repair during the night. And without that good restorative sleep, it causes us more difficulties in concentrating and paying attention and being creative throughout the day, which causes more stress, right? So we're not functioning at the levels we want. Now we're increase of stress, which increases the system, pressure on the system everywhere. So when you think about these low levels of stress and you look at what we've been experiencing over the course of the last year, it's hard to say it's low levels. These are pretty high levels of stress that we've experienced over the course of the year. And many of us, probably all of us at one point or another, have been experiencing these little mini fight or flight situations, maybe a little panicky, maybe a little anxious, worried. Our lives really aren't even they're immeasurably different than they were a year ago. 1 year ago, we were still meeting in classes. I mean, I know it's hard to remember. We didn't have masks on, and we actually saw students. We interacted. It's like it's crazy. How did we survive that, right? So we're much different now. Our world is completely different, and that kind of a shift, that major shift, it takes far less than that to get us into one of these sort of these fight or flight. And we were worried about, our job's going to be here, what's my life going to look like. We know maybe we've suffered losses, close to us or in our periphery. If nothing else, our inability to visit with friends and family and relatives, et cetera. It's been very difficult. So we've been under this constant pressure for a year, and that's in addition to what we just sort of normally experience in life with just life that can come and go with us. So the physiologic responses that our bodies have to stress is really nothing more than the body's natural way of saying, hey, look, there's something going on. And so often we don't connect the dots on that. We just feel anxious, or we feel something, maybe my stomach hurts, or I have a headache, or I don't know what, I feel irritable. And we're not really putting together that, hey, this is our body saying there's a problem and you need to address it. It's the same thing if you have tension or if you have a headache or something, it's your body saying, look, there's a problem someplace. So what happens is that we sometimes forget to look at these physiologic changes that we're going through and recognize that there's a bigger issue. So we maybe take an aspirin, or we lash out, or we take a drink, or we do whatever mechanisms that we've developed, adaptive or maladaptive, throughout our lives to deal with some of these things we do. And sometimes they're not so great. Many of us have put on weight over the course of the last year. We've been isolated. We've turned to, who knows what, in order to make it through. So part of our discussion this evening is going to be about recognizing the physiologic changes that have occurred, that occur when we experience these things, and realizing that, number one, it's okay, it's natural, and number two, we have to address the root cause of it. Maybe we can't go out and cure COVID or free up our states, but maybe what we can do is recognize, okay, that's what this is. I'm not A, going crazy, or B, failing anyone. This is just my body naturally responding to an unnatural situation. So that's the physiologic sort of thing in a bit of a nutshell, right there.
Appreciate that, Frank. Anyone have any comments based on what he said, or any reactions?
Oh, that totally resonates in this season. Totally resonates.
Yeah.
And I was even thinking about last night, like, because I've felt like a lot of those stress reactions in my body. I'm like, why am I struggling so much this season? I'm normally fine during a school year. Well, there's nothing normal about this. I mean, like, as you're talking through, like, you reminded me of that.
Yeah, thank you. That is so right. There is nothing normal about anything that we're experiencing right now. This is all abnormal, every bit of it. And even if you think about like the elections that happened, elections happen every 4 years. Been doing it for a couple hundred years in this country. It's like the most normal thing ever, right? Was there anything normal about this? Nothing. Even the things that we rely on to see this, I can rely on this. Even sporting events, I can rely on it. No, not so fast.
Yeah.
It's not a normal school year, for sure.
That's for sure. Well, thanks, Frank. And Lauren, did you want to share a little bit this evening about your perspective? I think it might be helpful.
Yeah, Frank, first of all, this isn't the first time that you've said this to me today, but it still like resonates like, each time hearing it. It's amazing how our mental, physical, emotional, spiritual, all of it's connected. If one is off, it throws everything else off, including the physical, and most people don't recognize that. I'm just going to talk a little bit about normalizing not being okay, and coming to grips with those feelings of anxiousness or stress or worry or sadness or anger, whatever it is you're feeling. Like I said before, this past year has definitely taught me to be grateful for the little things. And they're not necessarily little. I can walk, I can talk, I can breathe on my own. There are not a lot of people who can say that, given this pandemic. So, one of the things that I've noticed that a lot of us have experienced, at least during this past year, is just the grief portion of this pandemic. Not necessarily the loss of a loved one, but just the loss of that connection, being able to connect with another human being. I had no idea how this would affect me during this pandemic because I live so far away from my family. I don't see them anyway, so why should it matter? But at the end of the day, restricting me from seeing my family is what really bothered me. Couldn't get on a plane and go see my sister. That ate me up a little bit. Couldn't see my nieces. That ate me up a lot, you know. So I feel like within this year, we have to figure out how to redefine what was normal for us, right? So now here we are trying to figure out ways to connect with one another without, being so close to each other, ways to fellowship, without being in the same room, you know. And with that, trying to figure all of that out, still having life to live, having to work, having to be a mother or a father or a caregiver or whatever, those things are stressful. But I feel like a lot of us, including myself, kind of block those feelings because it's like, why am I stressed? I can't be stressed right now. I cannot be upset right now. I cannot be angry. I cannot have a slip up because I have things to do, and we put ourselves in that situation a lot of times to try to do everything because we feel like we have to, right? But at the end of the day, we're not robots and it's okay to not be okay, And as Frank said, a lot of times we don't even know what's going on. We don't know why we have these feelings. And this is when it becomes important to just kind of take a step back so that you can define those things. Right now, I am feeling anxious. I am sad. I am hurt. I am angry. Define it so that you know how to move forward with it. And then after you define it, you need to validate it. Yep, I feel like this, and it's okay. It's normal. It's fine to be angry or to not be in a so great mood, every single day. And then after you've defined it, you've validated it, now you need to inspire yourself with action, right? So, how do you move forward with this pain? How do you move forward with this anger? Do you sit in it, or do you motivate yourself to, excuse me, listen to some music, take a walk, or do something nice for someone else? As Frank mentioned earlier today, our feelings are, we have to honor our feelings, just like we honor our families, honor your spouse, your husband, or your wife. You have to honor those feelings, therefore you can honor yourself, right? Because like we said, like Frank just pointed out, it's all connected. When I'm upset, I get a headache. If I'm stressed out, I get a headache. I get physically sick, and then I have to take those steps back to figure out what's going on, with that, taking care of yourself. We can't work all day, we can't be these robots and have all of these obligations and not reward ourselves. And rewarding ourselves doesn't necessarily mean going out and spending money, on yourself. It may mean just sitting in a quiet room, it may mean journaling, it may mean calling that friend that you haven't talked to in a while just to have a conversation. It can mean whatever you want it to mean. But the fact of the matter is you've defined those feelings, you're okay with those feelings, and you're going to move forward with those feelings.
Thank you, Lauren. I have to tell you all that, well, again, you said this about Frank, but listening to both of you, I'm reminded again of the processes that are going on inside of me that I just push right through so often and just move on to the next thing, whatever it might be. As I'm listening to you, Lauren, I'm realizing that this last couple of weeks, I've really had this anger that I can't see my 3 and 6-year-old granddaughters. I haven't hugged them for a year, and that just ticks me off.
Yeah.
Just really, really miss them. My aging mother, I'd love to give her a hug. I haven't done that in a year because of her health and how she is with some of her health pieces. Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah,
I agree.
for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, it makes you mad, that we're not used to this. We should be able to go see our families when we want to. I lost my grandmother 4 years ago. It'll be 4 years on March 3rd, and I always get emotional around this time. But I lost my grandmother 4 years ago. I was very close to her, and she lives in Georgia. And I was telling one of my friends, like, I miss her so much, but I'm glad that she's not here right now, because if I could not see my grandmother, it would break me, it would really break my heart. So I definitely understand what you're saying, John. It's nerve-wracking, to say the least.
Yeah. When we talk about anger is a funny thing because it's an emotion that it's no worse than any other emotion we have. It's just an emotion. There's no good or bad. There's no value to it. It's just an emotion. And we sometimes think of it as a secondary emotion. Something happens first and then we feel anger. And usually it's pain or fear.
Yeah.
Sometimes frustration. Those 3 things happen and then we feel anger. Anger is sort of like it gives us energy to move. So if I'm afraid of something, I feel anger. Now I've got energy to act on it. So whenever I feel anger, I always ask myself, am I afraid? Am I hurt? Or am I frustrated? And that helps me to sort of get grounded in what I think my response ought to be. And sometimes it's I'm hurt, somebody hurt me, hurt my feelings or something, and my response is not a self-defense response. I'm feeling like I need to hurt this person back a little bit. They need to know how I'm feeling. And I think the value of feeling anger over this COVID thing is that I think what we're feeling there is we're feeling afraid. We're feeling fear because we don't know what's going to happen. We're feeling frustrated because we're things aren't working the way that we believe they should, and our lives have been mixed up. And we're feeling hurt in the sense of loss. We've all got people that we haven't been able to see. We've all got people that we've even friendships even or whatever, but or losses that we feel pain. And I think if we can look at our anger that way, then our anger doesn't have to be in vain. And then we won't let it escape. And then we wind up taking it out on the people that we are close to, or the few people that we are able to be in contact with. And I think the other thing is that, we are all highly effective people in our own way. We're leaders in a classroom, we're leaders in our homes, we're leaders. And feeling the way that we're feeling now makes us feel useless in a way. It makes us feel sometimes ashamed if I feel like I'm afraid, or if I feel like I'm just not on my game, and I feel bad, and I feel like my students can't know that I'm struggling. So we have those feelings, that guilt that kind of build up with us. And those things really work with our maladaptive coping mechanisms if we have them. Just a thought on that.
Now, what you just said there really resonates with me, because like I'm always advocating for my students and their mental health in my classroom, but with that, like I'm failing to even consider like what I am feeling like through all of this, because I feel that I need to put what they are experiencing first and put whatever I'm dealing with to the side.
Yeah, and that's typical, being in the helping field. We're all helpers, right? Whatever our roles are, we're helpers. And so we forget, that, oh, wait, I have to be okay too. I'm literally no good to anyone if I am not okay. And you have, like I said, you have to define those feelings and validate yourself. Validate those feelings. Yeah, I'm not okay right now. I'm a little stressed out right now. It perfectly fine. You're human. And what you don't understand, some people don't know that your students, my clients, they can tell when, something's off. They may not say anything, but they can tell, you know. So that's why it's important to not try to put band-aids on these emotions or try to suppress these emotions. Let's address it, address it and move forward.
Yeah, that's beautiful, Lauren. And I'll tell you, sometimes too, we can have these feelings, and then we ask ourselves, why am I feeling this way? I don't even know why I'm feeling this feelings of anxiousness and what's going on? Nothing is around. I'm not being physically threatened right now. Why do I have these feelings? It's a trauma response. That's a classic trauma. Our bodies are responding to what our brain is recognizing as a threat and a trauma. And it's saying, listen, we got to do something here. And so we feel like maybe we're going to come out of our skin sometimes. And what's so confusing, you think, well, why do I feel this way? Well, this is why you feel that way. This is a normal response. If you think about the way that our brains are designed to always look and scan to see that which is dangerous for us as an organism. So in a way, we're kind of pre-wired to look for the things that are negative. We're almost pre-wired to look for things that are dangerous. And what happens is if there's nothing in our environment that looks bad, things are going kind of well for us, our brain will sometimes come up with old things that we haven't fixed yet and said, hey, now it's a good time to think about this. Here you go. And we think, why did I think this? I'm not even, why would I even think this thought right now? And this whole last year has been a fertile territory for our brains to do this kind of stuff to us. And we can kind of get to where we're not really sure why this is happening. And I was talking a bit about, the maladaptive coping mechanisms. And those are mechanisms that we learned throughout our life, maybe from our parents or caregivers, or I don't know what, maybe through some kind of experimentation on our own unconsciously, that we learned that, hey, if I do this, I don't feel this feeling anymore. I don't feel this pain so much anymore. And some of those can be adaptive, that we have to learn the adaptive ones, and the maladaptive ones seem to come naturally to us. And I think it's important that we not only recognize this for ourselves, but we also learn to recognize it in the people who are around us. And I think that's part of what this whole discussion is about, is about being able to minister to each other in that way.
Thank you, Frank. Yeah, thank you, Lauren. And great point, Scott. I'll tell you, and mixing all of that, and then with what you said earlier, Frank, I've even felt the brain fog at times, not even having COVID, which can run with that, simply because our brains are trying to manage all of that at the same time and then shut pieces down. And yeah, there's so much going on. To just pause, like we're doing here in this moment, to reflect on it, is really, really vital and life-giving. Yeah, this is important work.
Yeah. If you think about it, the part of our brain that is, if you ever had this experience where you've been so angry about something and you can't find the words?
Mm-hmm.
So what that is the place where our emotions live is not the same place that our words live. So our words, we emote when we are in our mother's womb. Before we're born, we have emotions, but we don't learn to speak until we're what, like 12 or 30, how we when we learn to speak, whatever that is, right? So we don't learn to speak till we're much older. And so we have these emotions, and oftentimes we don't have the words that go with them. So those pieces of those live in two different geographical places in our brains even. So we sometimes, may feel bad that we don't have even the way to express these things. But when you look at it that way, why would we?
That's right. It's a good point. Absolutely. Well, I promised that I would share a little bit. I really believe it's important to anchor who we are in not only our understanding of ourselves, but also God's connection with us. We're at a rare place here in the Concordias where we can ponder how this intersection happens for us. And so what does God say about all of this, and how can we connect with him during these moments in time? One of the things I wanted to share with you is that I've struggled this past year, as I mentioned a little bit, with some anger or brain fog, but I talked to a therapist, some pastor friends. I also have to say that I'm reminded through this pandemic that my grandfather's brother died of a vaccine during smallpox almost 100 years ago. And his heart was weak and they didn't know it back in that day. I share all that because all of that milieu of stuff is just around in our minds. For every one of us, we have all kinds of pieces. And I'm reminded that Jesus knows that. He has lived our stress. He knows it intimately. I mean, consider his life on earth from childhood through his death and resurrection. He lived through stressful and traumatic experiences constantly. And he promises, not only does he know, but he promises to be present with us as we live through such things. That's what one of the last things he said before he left the earth in Matthew chapter 28. He doesn't deny the difficulties and hardships. You can see it in the gospel accounts, but he helps us, not only modeling for us the wonderful coping strategies that we have as communal people, as individuals, but also even healing and the ultimate deliverance for us. One of the things that somebody shared with me decades ago is that whenever we connect God's word to our lives or the situation that we're in some way, he called it a truth encounter. That challenged me, but I like that because it's God's truth that we're encountering as we encounter life. And yet I've come to realize over the decades that it's even deeper than that. There's an element of trust involved in that, that they're not just words on paper, but there's someone living in those words, through those words in us. So how is our relationship or connection with him as we go through it, as we engage with his word? You see, he's inviting us to trust him more and more. Consider for a moment in Matthew chapter 7, verses 24 and 25. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on a rock. The rain came down, the storms rose. Have any storms in your life lately? And the winds blew and beat against the house, yet it did not fall because it had its foundation on the rock. Jesus is talking about himself. As we trust him and act on his words, these words, on that trust, then he says, our house won't crumble. Our lives won't crumble in a storm. Even when we feel like everything's crumbling around us, we can be assured that he is anchoring us in something deeper and richer and bigger that can give us a sense of safety and connection. My questions tonight: what words of his are you trusting? Are you clinging to during the storms? And what words challenge you? I want to talk about 3 words just for a few moments that I think he brings up that might be helpful for this season of our lives in this time. The first is worry. In Matthew chapter 6, verses 25 to 34, Jesus says, don't worry, right? Don't worry, saying, what shall we eat or drink or wear? Because others run after those things. But you know your Father in heaven. He knows you need them. But seek first him, his work, his kingdom, his righteousness, and all those other things, they'll be given to you. So don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow is enough worry for itself. Each day is enough of its own stuff. Well, it can be easy to say, don't worry. But when we try to do it, that could be a different story. So your Father knows your needs, and that's where he points us. As we may feel worry and concern, as we may feel brain fog, he's saying, will you recall, will you cling to this promise that God has you? He has what you need. You know, King Hezekiah in 2 Kings 19, centuries ago, he had a conquering army coming to his city, and he didn't know what to do because they could have smashed it all. And so he took the letter of the threat and he laid it before the throne. And he prayed. He took his big concerns to God and prayed about a huge enemy army, and God handled it. How are you looking to him about the future or the concerns that you have? Second word, honesty. I like Psalm 13, the way it says it in the Message. In Psalm 13, David is saying that, if you have any trouble, come to God. But he does it in a way that's very honest. There's something about the book of Psalms, if you haven't read them lately, that many of them, they're just raw. They're the reality of life, just laying it before God. I remember the first time I heard somebody angry at God and praying, and I thought, what are they doing? God's going to zap them. Actually, God loves hearing us, no matter what we experience. Listen, as I read just a part of that psalm in chapter 13, actually it's 6 verses. I'll read the whole thing. See if you catch the glimpse of this and how David's experiencing this moment. How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I wrestle with my thoughts and every day have sorrow in my heart? How long will my enemy triumph over me? Look on me, answer me, O Lord my God. Give light to my eyes, or I will sleep in death. My enemy will say, I have overcome him, and my foes will rejoice when I fall. But I trust in your unfailing love, and my heart rejoices in your salvation. I will sing to the Lord, for he has been good to me. David's honest with God. Do you hear it? Will you be honest with him too? In 1 Peter chapter 5, Peter says, as we humble ourselves before God, then he can work his best. Humbling before God is a trust, and it opens us to be vulnerable, not shame or hiding or afraid, as you mentioned, Frank. When we trust, then we're free to be vulnerable and to talk about everything, to keep offering to him anxiety, concerns, whatever might be on our mind or heart. Have you talked honestly with him lately? Third word, rest. In Exodus chapter 20, we see that God commands how to live in community and how to conduct our lives. And then he says, and I want you to rest like the Lord rested. Give it a day, called it a Sabbath. God rested. Will you? You need it. We all do. Physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. When you rest, you're allowing your system to reset the way God designed it to be. You're trusting he's working beyond what you do, beyond you. The care and concerns may still be there tomorrow, but you may have better capacity to manage them. In Luke chapter 10, Jesus is talking to two sisters, Mary and Martha, and one of them is anxious and concerned, and she's doing all kinds of work around the house, preparing dinner and cleaning, and then she gets upset and tells Jesus about her being angry at her sister because her sister's just sitting there listening to Jesus. And Jesus says, well, actually, she needed this time with me. One thing that's needed for her right now. There's a place for having time with Jesus instead of the fear and anxiety driving our actions all the time. I like the way the Message says in Matthew chapter 11, where he talks about where Jesus actually invites us to bring our concerns, our burdens, and our weights, our anxiety to him. He says, are you tired, worn out, burned out? Come to me. Get away with me, and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. Jesus says he is our trusted place of rest. When and how have you rested? Where's your place with him? I wanted to share just a couple of practical things. I'm a believer that when it comes to adding new things in our life or considering changes, it needs to be very practical. So when can you connect with Christ in all of this? And how do you do that? I want to offer 3 areas: mind, body, and spirit. The first is mind. If you don't write regularly, I encourage you to do that. Write it out. Whether it's a journal in some form, speaking a journal, writing on a computer or longhand, something to get down your thoughts so that you can see what you're actually feeling and experiencing and thinking about it all. Get it out, get it down. And read. As distraction and relief, for information and growth. But I would encourage you especially take some time with scripture, even if it's early in the morning, when you get to the office, when you're going to sleep, the last thing on your mind, whatever it may be, where God speaks to you about life. Have you read through the Psalms lately? Just start at Psalm 1 and start reading through. You'll be amazed at how it can connect with your life. Or Ecclesiastes or Lamentations, where they're lamenting the things of this experience in life that you'll find very common even today. And how about connecting with Jesus again in a fresh way? I actually read the Gospels through every Lenten season, this time before Easter, because it reconnects me with him. And he has life, and he gets it, and he cares. I also want to offer, if you aren't familiar with it, Burned Out and Overburdened by the Chronicle of Higher Education. I have a copy. You're welcome to come and get it, or I can send you the link of how to get one. But it's a collection of articles for faculty and staff in higher ed about how to manage life during this COVID time and with all of the other pieces of life in our personal lives, as well as societal pieces. Your body. Care for yourself. Remember, it's an investment, not only in you, but the things around you, the people around you. Eat, drink, exercise, stretch, do things that are healthy and rejuvenating. I call them restorative things. How do they restore you? There's an old saying, if you haven't heard it, oxygenate yourself first. If you haven't heard that, it's a really good saying. In other words, take in the oxygen so that you have the resources to offer them, to live, to care for others. That's not being selfish. That's caring for the temple, this beautiful person that God has made each of us. You know, Jesus went to a quiet place to rest and to pray. He did that often. It's a great model. I encourage you, if you haven't lately, talk with a health professional about your body. When was the last time you got a physical exam? It's worth it. And the second thing with the body, talk to someone. I'm sure Frank and Lauren could talk a long time about the benefits of talking when it comes to managing stress and trauma, even the healing power that's in that. Consider talking with God, praying for even a few minutes every day, but also talking to a pastor or a clinical mental health therapist, or even a friend or coworker. You know, by God's grace, we are part of one uncommon, rare, and beautiful Concordia team. They're amazing people in our CUWAA world. I would encourage you, talk. You can call any of us and have a conversation. We're willing to listen. And then, not only mind and body, but very practically spirit. Feed your spirit. Keep good stuff coming in like this on a regular basis. Spend time each day connecting with God. It's my encouragement to you, especially this person of Jesus Christ. And remember, each person connects in a different way with God. So be open and experiment. Maybe it's reading or listening to the Bible. Maybe it's listening to music, reading poetry. I know we have some writers of poetry in our midst. I'd love to read some of it. Attend a discussion group or a Bible study. Attend worship. Pray in the evening or go for a walk and talk with God in the morning. Whatever it may be for you, experiment, invest. What ways will you connect with God? And I also want to encourage you to attend chapel. Here at Concordia, I just have to share with you, I think it's wonderful the way God does this. Months ago, the Lord directed our Pastor Randy Duncan, our campus pastor, for the week of March 15th through 19th to have a series called From Stressed to Blessed. Listen to these titles for a moment. One Day at a Time, Reflecting on Your Foundation, A Posture of Praise, The Ritual of Rest, it's a good one, or Dealing with Distractions. So I encourage you, spend some time with him, feed your spirit, take care of your body, engage with your mind. What does that strike up in all of you?
You know, John, when you were, I was talking to you a little bit before, but the image of writing down your fear, writing down your anxiety, and then literally laying it before God was so powerful for me. I could actually see myself in my house here writing, and I'm envisioning writing down what's bothering me, and this literally laying it there before God to say, here, this is something I can't deal with. This is too great for me, but here, you take it. And it's one thing to say those words, and that's fine too, saying the words, but there's something about writing it down and kneeling down, and that just to me was such a powerful image for me. That's really resonating with me, and the Psalms too. It's perfect Psalms about the anger, right? The anger and calling out to God and saying, I'm frustrated, I'm hurt, or I'm afraid, or whatever that is, but feeling these feelings. Yeah.
I used to I'm big on journaling, writing it out, and all of that. But this year, or this past year, I found myself not doing it because I was afraid of feeling what I was, feeling. I felt like writing it down was like making it real, and I wasn't ready to face that, and that just it makes me think about my clients and the students, how they feel. I get it. Um, but it is important to face these things. We have to, because they're not going to just disappear on their own. Um, sure, we cannot think about it. It's a band-aid though. It's going to come up in some shape, way, or form, throughout your life. Just like Frank, you were talking about trauma, and like, sometimes we'll feel things, not really understanding why we feel things. Well, sometimes it can be something that happened days ago or weeks ago or years ago. And because we have this moment in time where we've been forced to sit down, and have these quiet moments, it's like your mind is like, oh, nope, don't want to deal with that. Nope, don't, So I found myself doing that a lot this past year, and had to take a little bit of my own advice, get real, with myself, and literally just lay it all out and give it to God, because I'll never be able to do the things that He can do in us. So yeah, that was power. I really like that, John. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing that.
This all's just been really good. Just hearing every single part of this. I mean, like, I think so often, like, we're in a society that's like, we focus on like the go, 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 and like we don't think about rest. And even with our society, we don't think about rest in God. But like, I've seen the impact of that over this last year. And like, yeah, I think honestly, like, having God has been like the biggest thing that's gotten me through, because I know how much worse it could be. But yeah, there's still, like, Lauren, you're talking about like avoiding journaling. And as you're talking, I'm gonna be honest, I felt like I was being called out because the exact same thing. But like, at the same time, like, writing down those things, like, a part of me wishes I would have written down like things from the start, because down the line, like, I'd be able to look and be able to say, like, look at what God has brought me through, and look at the point that God has brought me to, and like something that I want to like really work to get back into.
Well, there's no real strategy. Just do it.
And just do it. I love it.
Just do it. Just do it. Your journaling doesn't have to make sense. It doesn't have to, be perfect grammar or perfect English. I'm not reading it. You're the person that's reading it. So whatever comes out, however, your hand, just give your hand that control and just write it out. If you don't like writing, record it on your phone. That's what I do. And just get it out. Got to get it out.
Yeah, Scott, I don't think you were alone in that feeling. I felt a little twinge myself. Like, ooh, when was the last time I put my journal down? I don't know how long ago, and I haven't picked it up either. So no, you're right, and that's one of those beautiful adaptive kind of coping mechanisms. I think that's so important for us to develop and keep up. That's good.
And like you said, Scott, being able to see where you came from and where you are now is beautiful. I sometimes go back and read my old journal entries from years ago, and I'm just like, oh, that girl. I don't know who she is now. I don't know where She is.
I have to
I'm
tell you
grateful
all,
for that.
I have to tell you all that I'm aware that President Barry actually journals daily, but he does it in the middle of his day.
Interesting.
He needs a break, and he discovered, he shared this with me one time. He tried doing it in the morning, tried doing it in the evening, tried doing it at other times, and he said, in the middle of the workday, to just catch his breath and journal for a little bit. So I'll just throw that out as an option, everybody. And yeah, just a break, get it out. Yeah. Well, I
However it
know.
works for you.
Yes, that's right. That's right, Lauren. Yep. I know we're about at our time. I just want to thank you so much, Lauren and Frank, for giving us, sharing your wisdom. And Scott, thanks for joining us tonight. And for all those that may watch this in the future, thanks for taking the time to be with us. And let us know if you'd like to talk more. Thank you, everyone. God bless you.
God bless you. Bye.